Hey everyone, welcome to my studio. I'm Shelly Hanna, and today we're going to paint a landscape. It's always good to get started with a plan. This is the image I used, which was a little too washed out for me, so I threw it into a photo editing program and really increased the saturation of the color. Then I used the golden ratio to help me align things and change the composition. And here I'm popping on the original photo below so you can see the differences. And there are critics everywhere, of course, but I remedied that. At the beginning of my paintings, I like to establish the values early on. It gives me a little bit of a roadmap to know where I'm going. I did this using burnt umber and a little bit of cad red. After the initial drawing dried, I thinned the paint with Gamsol and washed it over the canvas using a towel to wipe away the clouds. The next step is to block in basic colors. I started with alizarin crimson and burnt umber on the left and made a dark green with a little yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber. For the sky, I used cobalt teal with a little white, and then I started mixing in some other colors. For the mountains in the distance, I mixed some violet colors to create depth. Due to the effects of atmosphere, anything in the distance of a landscape painting will take on blue or violet tones. As you move forward in the landscape, warmer tones become more saturated. And for this part of the painting, I decided to go in and do a lot of wiping out of the clouds and then really kind of softening the edges of the clouds with the brush. I noticed when I was painting this painting, as I was looking back on the footage, I really wasn't using enough paint on my brush, and I don't know why I was doing that. But I would recommend to use a little more paint on your brush. I ended up cutting out a lot of footage on this because I just was brushing my brush around and there was really nothing happening because there was no paint on my brush, which is ridiculous. And here it looks like I've caught a loose bristle from my brush and was getting that off the canvas. That happens not too often with good brushes. I'm using rosemary brushes and they are fabulous. As I'm blocking the color in the foreground here, I'm starting to think about complementary colors. And those are colors that are opposite on the color wheel. So it's always good to have a color wheel handy or nearby when you're painting, because it can kind of get you to try some color combinations that you wouldn't necessarily think about. So here I'm putting a little bit of gold in that foreground color, which is a complement to those violet colors. And then in the background there, the blue of the sky is complementary to some of the orangey colors in the mountains. So there's a lot of complementary colors happening in this little painting. And that graphic is a little reminder that if you're enjoying the content that I'm creating on this channel, to please give me at least a like and subscribe. It really does help me to know that you want to see more painting videos. And if you want to see more, I'll keep making them for you. I have about 5 or 6 paintings that I've got started, and I'm recording as I'm painting them. But it does take a really long time to put these videos together. And I'd say I have about 5 or 6 videos that have been recorded, but I haven't edited yet. So there are a lot of projects in the works. I just don't have an editor or a writer or anything like that. And it's just going to take a little bit of time. So I appreciate your patience. And here I'm starting to add a few lighter tones. That was Ralphie. And now he's gonna cry. What'd you want, Ralphie? And anyway, here I am establishing some of the lighter tones on the rock, and I am getting kind of I don't know, a little too detailed on some of this at this stage, but I am trying to establish some of those brighter highlights on the side of the rock so that the rock looks like it has dimension. Carving these rocks takes quite a bit of time. It actually took a lot longer than I expected it to, but I don't know. It was kind of fun to play with the subtle variations in color. I tried to get some cool tones and warm tones playing off of each other in the rocks. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's subtle. But I am trying to make a conscious effort to add variations in there. And speaking of variations, it's always good to vary the edges that you use in a painting. Edges are important in paintings because they help to define the shape and forms, but they also create a sense of depth in how the different shapes relate to each other in space. Hard edges give the impression of clarity and definition, while soft edges blend and create depth. The human brain is excellent at completing the shape of an object that isn't fully outlined. You can increase the intrigue of a painting by using soft or lost edges skillfully. This stage of the painting, I usually call it the messy middle, but I think because I was holding back on loading my brush, the painting doesn't really look as messy as I usually have it. But if you're in the middle of a painting and it looks terrible, don't give up, because everybody's paintings look pretty terrible in the middle of a painting. Now, this video is based off of an article that I wrote that's on my website. So if you want more detailed information about 10 steps for painting a landscape, you can visit my website and I'll leave the link in the description below. One thing I didn't mention about this painting was how tiny it actually is. It's 7 inches wide by 5 inches tall, and I painted it on an oil-primed linen panel. And I really love painting on linen. And if you haven't painted on linen before, do yourself a favor and get a small pack of linen panels. I get mine from Jerry's Artarama, but you can get them, from Blick or other places. But they're really worth it. Whenever I paint on regular cotton canvas now, I have to add at least 2 coats of primer in order to get a smoother finish that's more like linen, because I just find that the regular cotton is way too bumpy. One of the most important steps, for me at least, is to get up and walk away. Sometimes you just need to have a little distance from your painting so that you can come back to it with fresh eyes. Another thing to do is to set a timer so it'll go off every 45 minutes to an hour. This will give your mind and body a much needed break if you've been immersed in painting for a while. And it's always really good to stand back from your painting at a distance so you can get a good look at it overall. Another trick that you can use to get a good sense of how your painting is coming along is to take a picture on your phone and then look at the composition really small on your phone. And that'll kind of give you a simulation of standing back far from your painting. Stepping back before you add details is pretty important, because if you start adding details to a painting where the shapes and forms are not accurately rendered, it can really waste a lot of time, because you might end up adding a bunch of detail over something that's inaccurate, and then you have to go back and paint everything out. I'm sure I took a lot of breaks while I was painting this little landscape. Another step that I take in all of my paintings is to go back in and reinforce my dark areas. And this is something that happens pretty regularly. You'll paint things in and then you'll paint things out. And if you start to lose your dark areas, then the painting kind of starts to fall apart a little bit. So I'm always squinting my eyes, looking at my reference, and then looking back at my painting and seeing where I'm losing my darks so I can go back in and reinforce them. And I may have darkened that down with a little burnt umber, but I'm going in and just reinforcing all of those rocky edges a little bit, and then I'll probably go in and add some highlights to really make that rock formation start to build. For this painting, I was introducing some new paint colors, and they were more transparent colors from Blue Ridge Oil Colors. And the three colors that I was using, especially on the rocky parts, was quinacridone magenta, trans red oxide, and trans yellow oxide. And it was kind of fun playing with transparent colors because it kind of gives you a layered effect. You know, with oil painting, you can get this translucent quality with the paints when you add a lot of layers on there. And especially with glazing in transparent colors, it's just a really nice effect. And later in the painting, you're going to see where I'm using some alizarin crimson mixed with some burnt umber to darken parts of the mountain and kind of create more form. And here I'm doing a little more landscaping in the front. Oh, that was Charlotte. I don't know if you could hear her. My animals have to have a part in all of my videos. But as I was saying, I was doing a little more touching up on the landscape in the foreground here. And with the foreground, I really didn't want to have a whole lot of detail because I wanted the focus to really be in the middle of that painting with the mountain. When I created the composition for this painting, I really increased the mountain on the left side. And by doing that, it created this window for the viewer to have something to look through. So that's just one of the little tricks that you can use when you're figuring out where you want the viewer's eye to go. I didn't want the viewer's eye looking at the foreground. I really wanted the viewer to look through that mountain pass and look off into the distance. And it looks like I just can't seem to leave these clouds alone. I'm just buffing out that cloud, making it all misty and everything. I think I go back in and wipe it out again. I don't know. Yep, there we go. Wiping the cloud out again, making it a little brighter. I really didn't pay as much attention or give as much thought to this cloud as I should have. And so I was kind of making things up as I went along, because there weren't really any cool looking clouds in the original photo. So I should have gotten a good reference photo and used that for making a cloud instead of just making it up in my mind. And as I talked about earlier, I went back in, I stepped away, and then I came back and I realized that there wasn't enough shape to that mountain. It just didn't feel as strong as I wanted it to. So that's where I went back in with the glazing and glazed over some of that transparent alizarin with, I believe I used some burnt umber, and just worked that into the painting to really create that form. And at this stage, I'm just adding in a few little touches and getting some of the values correct and just adding all of my final details. At some point, you gotta call it and say it's done. So I think I was pretty much there. But apparently I really couldn't let go, and I just kept painting these bushes over and over again. Let it go, Shelley. Let it go. And there we go. Here's the final painting. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please like and subscribe, and check out some of my other videos. Until next time, keep on painting.